Good afternoon and welcome to the Turntable. I'm Jason Lawrence Turner, the senior pastor of Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, right here in the heart of the Bluff City, Memphis, Tennessee. And this is my wife, Bridget Turner, who joins us over the past couple of weeks in important conversations surrounding this pandemic. We're excited about this conversation today with two people who we think the world of and the work that they're doing representing the city of Memphis on the state and the federal level. And I just want to, they really don't need an introduction. I'm going to present them to us on today. I want you to welcome our Congressman from the 9th Congressional District, Congressman Steve Cohen. And as well, we welcome State Senator Raumesh Akbari from District 29. We're so excited to have you all with us today to join into this conversation pertaining to issues that are surrounding the pandemic that we're living through. And so I have a very simple question to begin our conversation with today. How are you doing in the midst of this pandemic and with the adjustments you've had to make? And what have been some of your priorities with not being able to convene in Nashville and Washington, D.C.? What have been some of your priorities for the greater Memphis community and even our nation?
Well, I'll take it first. Sorry for the sentence. It's been really strange. This has been 8 weeks. And in the last 8 weeks, I've been to Washington the 2 times we had votes. Flew up and flew back one day for one, and the other time I went up and came back the following day. Other than that, the only buildings I've been in Memphis in the last 8 weeks, other than my home, have been about a 15-minute venture into Walgreens and the airport. So it's been real strange. I get out and try to walk some. Oftentimes when we have caucus calls, and we have at least 3 or 4 caucus calls a week, I will try to take a walk during the caucus call so I get a little exercise, a little sunshine, fresh air. But lots of caucus calls, lots of constituent issues and calls. Our staff is working 24/7 pretty much. They're still active, working remotely, both in Washington and in Memphis. So we get constituent issues. And on unemployment compensation, oftentimes we are privileged to have the help of Senator Akbari's office to help us with that issue, which is really a state issue. And she's got a staff person who's worked with us on helping people get their unemployment compensation. We deal with the PPE program and the PPP program and people concerned about their IRS checks and all kind of different issues that continue to go on, veterans issues and all. So we stay active. It's been very strange. My health is good. I'll go back to Washington again, either on Friday or Tuesday, for meetings on Friday or Tuesday. I guess I'll go the day earlier. It's a little eerie going into an airport still because you don't know who you're going to be sitting next to. The illness is invisible, and you be next to the nicest, most healthy person in the world. They could have the virus and not know it because it's asymptomatic. So it's a little bit strange. Airports are real empty. Planes are pretty empty. And Congress, there's no citizens up there. So it's very different. But everybody's just feeling the same thing all over, no matter what their business is or whatever they're interested in. It's all changed.
Yes, thank you. Senator Akbari.
Yeah, so like Congressman Cohen said, it's been very different. We have not been convening in person. Actually, our legislature took a recess, I think the 3rd week in March, and we won't reconvene until June the 1st. But we've been doing virtual town halls. Congressman Cohen was a part of one of them, which is a really cool way to keep in touch, and we're very thankful that he was there for that. And then also just making sure that we're active on social media. We have a tremendous amount of unemployment claims that we're receiving. The system was already overdue for an overhaul. That was already something the department had requested in this year's budget. And then to have it strained in this way has been pretty horrible. They did dedicate an additional 30 employees to help with the backlog starting on Friday. So hopefully that will move things forward. We've been promised that a significant backlog will be cleared by Tuesday. So we'll see, but just transitioning, making sure that we're continuing to serve the community. My parents have a small business, so I've definitely had to jump in both feet forward with that. So that's been something to balance. And I think, every day looking for hidden lights of goodness and for hidden blessings. I think drawing closer to people, being able to virtually connect with them, even though not in person, has really been very helpful. And then, of course, just knowing that we're all in this together. So trying to kind of manage that, and also making sure that we are covering every aspect. I mean, from those who are incarcerated to those who are homeless on the streets. This crisis has really highlighted the gaps between the haves and the have-nots, and the type of services that are required and that we can help with on a federal level with Congressman Cohen, and on a state level in the legislature with myself and my colleagues.
Either one of you can answer this question. How do you think Memphis has responded to this crisis?
I would say pretty well. I think both the mayors have been right to have us have different and more strict rules than maybe the states had at large, and to continue our stay-at-home measures. The best thing we can do is to continue to keep stay at home, wash your hands constantly, touch anything, cardboard, you name it, anything that's not been in your home, wash your hands for 30 seconds, 25 seconds at a minimum. Keep social distancing 6 feet, and we ourselves are the best defense we've got. I do think that the state might have opened a little early, and we may feel the effects of that, and other states may as well, because our rate of infection has continued to go up, and the president's guidelines said you shouldn't do any of these phase-ins until you've had 2 weeks of your rate of infection going down. And hardly anybody's had that except New York City and maybe a few of the other most hard-hit cities like Detroit or New Orleans, possibly, because that's they get so high. So really, everybody's opened up early, and the president hadn't condemned that. He had said, "Hey, wait a minute! My regulations said you shouldn't do it." The president would like everybody to jump out there and go to a restaurant, go to a department store, and go to a ball game tomorrow, and he would that would help get the economy moving and improve the stock market and improve his reelection chances. There would, though, be people dying, because more people would get the coronavirus, would be sick, and go through really an awful period of illness. It's apparently a just atrocious illness, and then people die. And we're basically putting economic recovery and the president's political fortunes ahead of our nation's health. And you think about the fact that you're basically somehow quantifying or qualitatively determining what's a person's life worth. And the president's decided we got to lose these lives. That's too bad, because we got to get the economy going. That's more Pastor Turner's world. God should make those decisions, and God does not have orange facade and a fake hair.
Well, I agree with Congressman Cohen. The city has done a phenomenal job shutting things down in an early fashion before the state reacted at all, where they were still having people convene. I think Nashville acted first, and then Memphis kind of kicked into gear. And I think Mayor Strickland and Mayor Harris have really done a good job working with our health department to have a phased-in approach, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, like Congressman Cohen spoke about. Today we received numbers for Tennessee, 520 odd new cases, the third largest increase in cases since this whole began. So I think that, yes, the state reopened too soon. I'm happy that the major cities are doing a phased-in approach, but we're still seeing the state kind of intervening on certain industries, like close contact industries like beauty shops and barbershops. So I think we have to be careful. I see far too many people who do not have masks on and who are not practicing social distancing. Nothing has changed about this virus. The only thing that we have now is an ICU room bed for you, and that's right now. If the surge were to kick up, then that would also be in risk again. So I really think the city's done a great job. County's done a great job. We got to get the state to listen, obviously. And then we have the added benefit of being connected to Mississippi and Arkansas. And so the actions that they take also impact us tremendously. And we all know Mississippi is usually, they're the last to act, and Arkansas never put a stay-in-place order in at all. So we have to deal with those consequences.
And I think the two counties are Crittenden and DeSoto, the two that border us.
Yes. The first week of, second week of the turntable, we had a hospital administrator to come on and engage in this similar conversation. I kind of want to ask a similar question to you all concerning healthcare disparities that I had the opportunity to serve on the board of Church Health Center, and typically what we've seen even before this crisis is that poor and people of color are bearing the brunt of this particular crisis. And so I'm curious to know what nuances in policy are being discussed at your respective areas as to how we're going to minister or meet the needs of those who are disproportionately affected in communities of color and those who lack access to health care even prior to this crisis.
Well, the House Democratic Caucus in Washington has constantly been aware of and concerned about these differences. These are differences that have existed for many years, and they're an outgrowth of years and years of neglect, years and years of Jim Crow piled on top of slavery. And too many people of color don't have the luxury that we have to work from our homes. They're out there in direct contact with the public, whether it's in the grocery stores and the warehouses. They're not with the public, but they're doing their job with others. They're in the front lines, healthcare workers, and they're exposed more. But they also have food deserts and health deserts that make it more difficult for them to have healthy lifestyles, more likely to be obese or to get diabetes because they don't have access to proper foods in their neighborhoods and fruits and vegetables and all, and access to physicians. We're funding community health centers through this. We've funded community health centers through the ACA, and that's going to be helpful. We need to see to it that there are other efforts to increase the minimum wage. The idea that we don't have a $15 minimum wage when these executive salaries are in the multi-millions of dollars, and we're seeing these people are putting their lives on the line, and without the people at the lower end delivering the Amazon packages, Jeff Bezos can't be a billionaire. So we should be seeing this more clearly, that people on the front lines working in grocery stores, working directly with people in warehouses and delivery and all these other areas, and first responders are so important. The sanitation workers, which are so iconic in Memphis for the Dr. King's coming to March here and unfortunately his assassination in '68. Those issues are still with us, and that work is noble, that work is important, and they should be paid a living wage, a good wage, just as Dr. King came here in 1968 to talk about that all work has value and that we need to value it. So I hope that we will get that understanding. We have bills that we filed. Our CARES bills include monies for community health centers and to give different programs, whether it be minority business centers, additional funds, and we've got programs to look into the homeless and to try to find help for them through this crisis and ways to bring food. We try to increase SNAP payments. The Republicans won't even increase SNAP payments or payments for women, infant, and children. They're still looking at tax breaks like the payroll tax, which the president's behind, that is, gives the people at the top 10%, like a $3,000 plus savings, and it gives the people at the bottom 20% a $50 savings. I'd call it tax scam too. But they continue to look at things like that, and they want to. Trump's other big thing is he wants to allow the deduction of wheeler dealer beverages and food at restaurants to make them deductible. You know, again, that's for the people with money and the businesses and the corporate powers. So there's been a big difference. There is a big difference in Democrats and Republicans how they look at it, whether it's top bottom or bottom up. But I think everybody should see that all work has value and needs to be appreciated and needs a minimum of a $15 minimum wage as a border. And Senator, do you have the same kind of situations in Nashville?
Yeah, I think so. I think the part of Tennessee's failure is not expanding Medicaid. It's really leaving, billions of dollars on the table where we could really use, and not in our rural and urban areas, those who need insurance the most are not able to get it. And I told my colleagues in the General Assembly, I said, listen, I represent an urban area. Our hospitals are not going to close. They might struggle to balance their budget. They might have to make cuts, but your hospitals are actually closing. People in your district have a 45-minute drive between their home and an emergency room. And in most science situations, that's DOA. They are not going to be able to receive the care they need. So I think that would go a long way, not just looking at physical health, but also looking at mental health in our communities, and certainly a minimum wage. Tennessee conforms to the federal minimum wage, and there hasn't been an increase in that in several years. Every effort that we've tried to push to raise the minimum wage or create a state specific has been completely shot down by the Republican supermajority. But I think those are two very key issues to be able to reach people and help end disparity. And of course, education, focusing on strengthening our public schools as opposed to investing in programs that actually take dollars from the public school system. The Shelby County school system has shown through the I-Zone and that model that if you increase funding and training, you can increase and have better outcomes. So why not invest in things that we know works instead of creating different programs that we know have not been successful in other states? So I think those are key, making sure people have an affordable living wage, making sure they have healthcare, and certainly making sure they have an education where they can be competitive, not just in Memphis and Tennessee, but in a global market.
When it comes to the policy, the CARES Act was a significant package that took some time, but it eventually came through. What other legislation is in process that will assist in the economic recovery?
We're working on a CARES 2. We've had 4 different bills passed since we've gotten into this crisis. Only one of them was called CARES. That was the big $2 trillion bill. We had others that were hundreds of billions of dollars, and the most recent supplemental that was close to $500 billion. CARES 2 will be big. That's why we talk about it. It's going to be big. We haven't said the number. I think it's going to be very big. Right now, it's not going to be bipartisan because the Republicans don't want to go along with much of what we are proposing in the House. They don't want to go along with increasing, as I've mentioned, SNAP payments or WIC. They're not that concerned about putting more money into state and local governments. Mitch McConnell said let them go bankrupt. Trump today announced he was putting about $11 billion to the states in testing equipment, and that's fine, but we're talking probably close to $650 billion to the states. That's something he's not willing to do unless he gets his tax breaks for the rich and his tax breaks for whining and dining at the most expensive restaurants. That doesn't affect the average person, and that's where you come from the top down rather than the bottom up. That bill will include election day voting by absentee ballot. That bill will include lots of social programs that need to be addressed, to giving people PPE that are healthcare workers, to helping healthcare, the community health centers and others stay afloat, and to try to make sure the money goes to where it belongs, to the small business people. The PPP was something we had to do. We didn't have much time, and we had to do something to try to give a push to the economy. But at the same time, we should have had more restrictions to make sure that we looked at the balance sheets and made sure people needed the money that got it. We had some of the businesses that got it that shouldn't have, publicly held businesses that had access to capital and deep reserves, like Ruth Chris Steakhouse and some big hotel management firm out of Dallas that had Ritz-Carltons, et cetera, Auto Nation and stuff. They gave their money back eventually. They were shamed into giving their money back. Some of the businesses have not. They never should got it. The first round of PPP money, the first $500 billion, a lot of it went to high loans, large loans to a small number of businesses that were publicly held businesses or businesses that really didn't need it. We have a public relations political firm here that never should have gotten it, and they recently said, well, we took the PPP because we want to make sure we're secure. We may not need it, but we want to make sure we're not secure. The law specifically said you're not supposed to get it if you're a political firm, because that just reeks of cronyism. So it could have been better. It should have been better. The CARES 2 will be better, but I don't know that we'll get any bipartisan support, and I don't know that we'll get the Senate to go along with it. We work on lots of proposals, even though we're not in session. Sometimes the power of a letter can make a difference, and we sent letters out to the heads of the airlines encouraging them to have their employees on the flights and the passengers all wear face masks. When I'd gone on those 2 flights, I'd seen flight attendants without face masks, people on the planes without face masks, and I didn't feel comfortable. Within a day, they responded and they started requiring, now they all do, their employees and all passengers to have on face masks. Frontier was going to charge an extra amount of money. I think it was anywhere from $30 to $70 for somebody to have the middle seat empty. So basically, you were conditioning your health on your finances, and that was wrong. They came the day after we sent our letter with Congressman Chewy from Garcia of Chicago and Senator Ed Markey, they responded to our letter and they took that program out. So we can use our power of suasion through letters, and we've been doing that too.
I have noted, and one of the noticeable absences for the United States has been at the international tables around, this health crisis. And so our historic allies, Great Britain, France, Germany, have all been there as allies in this crisis, wanting to share research, so forth and so on. What is the risk when the United States doesn't show up at those tables?
It's great. I go to conferences in D.C. with the Aspen Institute puts on, and they've been doing them by Zoom or some other reasonable facsimile of such. And Richard Haas, who's one of the leaders on international relations, and spoke with us last week, and he said, it's very unusual. The United States is not there, and we're not recognized as we have been around the world as a leader and somebody who shares the values of nations and look to people that look toward us as a friend and an aid. So that's been unfortunate. We've ceded that opportunities to China with their economics, and foreign policy to Russia and the Middle East, and we're giving up the idea of America first is eventually going to make America an afterthought. And I know Senator Akbari is respected in Washington and other places and invited on some international trips, and she understands how the rule of law was something that people looked to the United States for.
That's true. It's really astonishing to see the breakdown of the transatlantic relationship under the Trump administration. It is, I think, the first couple of years, the first year, they were kind of optimistic, still polite. By the second year, it was like, no, this man, after he started instituting tariffs and things of that nature, I think they started to kind of take him a little more seriously, in the sense that he was not someone who wanted to continue this very important relationship. Really, if you look at the international press, they are kind of making a mockery of him in this situation. And he pushes this isolationist policy, which has never been good for the United States, and certainly is not good in this global pandemic that we find ourselves in. So it's crazy to me that he will continue to just push these policies. And that's why it's so important that we have a free and fair election in November, where it's accessible to everyone, so that, the voice of the public can be heard.
Talking about the election that's coming up in November, this is a major election year. And I have to admit, personally, I'm scared to go to the polls and vote because of coronavirus. They said there will be another spike in the fall. What is being done to ensure that Americans can exercise their right to vote and do so safely?
We're trying to get in, and we will have in our CARES 2 bill, a requirement that there is in the federal election of November, that there will be mail-in ballot opportunities with postage paid, and that those ballots will be mailed to every single voter to be able to use them. And we're trying to see to it that there's monies made available so that when people do want to go vote in person, which a lot of people want to, that the sites are cleaned off, that they have equipment, masks and gloves and all, so that people feel safe. Their equipment will be cleaned. We're trying to do everything we can. Now, the Republicans don't care about that. A lot of Republicans seem to, and nationally it's over 70%, Democrats and Republicans both in favor of it, and Republicans have used it to their advantage around the country. But Trump doesn't see it to his advantage, and that's all really that matters to him. So we're going to have trouble getting that passed, but I guess if it's in a bill that passes the Senate, although McConnell does pretty much what Trump wants, and all the others fall in like lemmings, with the exception of Mitt Romney, and it'll be tough to get something done. But we do now, and I don't, Raumesh, if you know this or not, and I should. I read something that the last day to apply for absentee voting was May the 8th, which is behind us. I hope that was for the August election, but do you know?
Yeah. It was for August, and I thought it was actually the first day. Like, I know that the Secretary of State put out a bunch of information about applying to receive an absentee ballot. But yes, no, it was for the August election. But they've pretty much been, what's the word? I don't want to say, they have not been cooperative when it comes to trying to do any sort of expansion of absentee ballots. You can only request one if you are over the age of 60 or meet other conditions. When the legislature was last in session, the Democratic Caucus, and as a reminder, there are only 5 of us in the Senate of 33. So, we try, but we were pushing along with the House Democratic Caucus to at least expand the criteria or have no criteria. As long as you requested one, you were able to receive it. The Republican supermajority's answer was to have consolidated voting centers, which make them like voting super centers. So instead of, so essentially you're putting more people in the same building at the same time. It really was the exact opposite of what science suggests. So we're still working on it and aggressively talking with the Commissioner of Elections and the Secretary of State and the Governor's office, pushing like, hey, this is a bipartisan concern. Our state primaries and our federal primaries are in August. Every member of the House is on the ballot. Even if they have no competition, they're still on the ballot. So it's a bipartisan issue to allow absentee voting, to make sure that if you have in-person voting, because people will want to vote in person, they are approved by, public health and medical professionals. So we know that we have the proper things in place so that we're not continuing the spread. But they just haven't been very receptive. And a line that my caucus has been using a lot, and it's true, is they're forcing us to choose between our personal health and the health of our democracy. And that's simply undemocratic. And it's not something that any party should be pushing, any American should be pushing.
There's a lot riding on this election, and this is my last question, and I would love to hear from both of you all. I often say, not only is this election important, this is an election for the soul of our democracy. If you all could just articulate to those who are viewing, what do you believe is at stake in this election?
Everything's at stake. I said when I spoke at Myron Lowry's prayer breakfast, 1st of January this year, give or take the 1st, I think it was the 1st, that this coming election is going to be Armageddon. And yes, it's Armageddon times 666. It's seriously out there. The rule of law is in jeopardy. Equal opportunity, equal access to the law, equal treatment of the law is at jeopardy. We've seen Bill Barr, who is the enforcer for Donald Trump. He's like no other attorney general ever, trying to mislead the public in what the Mueller report was about. His first statements that were give or take 30 days before he released it. Then when he released it, he took another 3-hour opportunity to, again, mislead it and say there was no collusion and there was no obstruction. And that's not what Mr. Mueller said. He said it was up to the Congress to find the right remedy, which would have been impeachment on the obstruction of justice issue. And he was banned. Attorney Department of Justice opinion couldn't indict the president no matter what. That doesn't mean there was an obstruction of justice. It means that under the Justice Department's legal orders, opinions, that you couldn't indict the president. That didn't mean Congress couldn't do it for an impeachment or that he didn't do it. So anyway, he's tried to mislead the public. This saying that Flynn's guilty plea should be obfuscated by their withdrawing the case is, there was a real good article on there today by one of the prosecutors who said her words were misused and misdirected to justify the idea of there not being a material fact that he lied about. And there was another prosecutor who had an article in the Washington Post today saying that the reason he quit his job after they got involved in Roger Stone's sentencing was that Roger Stone had done what he had alleged to have done. He lied to Congress. He lied to Congress about contacts that the Trump administration had with Russia, and that the sentence that they suggested was within the sentencing guidelines, and that never has the sentencing guidelines been overruled by the Attorney General, and never does the Attorney General make statements about future cases or about cases where the mainline prosecutors don't agree or can't respond. So anyway, but I'm getting at, the rule of law has been attacked. And of course, I said a long time ago, when Barr didn't show up to a hearing, they called him Chicken Barr. Well, Chicken Barr has morphed into Vulture Barr, and he's gnawing the carcass of what's left of the rule of law and equal treatment before the law. And it seems if you're a friend of Trump's, you get what you want. This is what you get in banana republics. And everything is at stake in this election because we've got a president who is a sociopathic narcissist, who is not mentally up to the challenge, intellectually up to the challenge, and he's a liar. Other than that, what else can you say? I mean, I've said he's a combination of Sidney Schlenker and Dana Kerr for worst days. We're in bad. We got to get this man out, or America's going to be lost. It's not going to be America as we've known it. It's not going to be a country that looked upon as foreign countries as somebody to respect.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Congressman Cohen nailed it when he said everything. If you look at what the Trump administration has done on an international level, on a domestic level, from trying to dismantle healthcare to helping the extremely wealthy and at a consequence to those who are in the middle class, from dismantling or trying to dismantle public education by pushing the privatization of education, looking at his policies around criminal justice or lack of criminal justice reform. I give him some props on some things that he's done. He did do some good things in that arena, but not nearly enough. I also think that he actually is trying to take credit for something that Democrats have been pushing forever. So yay, happy that he agreed to a good idea that was not his. But he said during the last election, African Americans, what the hell do you have to lose? I mean, we see the consequences of having people in place that he's appointed to the federal bench and even to the Supreme Court. That's my fear, because long after the Trump administration, these lifelong appointments will continue to haunt us. And that's what a lot of my Republican colleagues who have, they're saying, well, his behavior is so horrible, but we're focused on making sure that we have a conservative Supreme Court, or we're focused on making sure we have a conservative federal bench. Our country cannot afford to have 4 more years of someone who only cares for himself, who has shown on a public stage what true and utter corruption looks like. And America is a republic. It is not like a country that is led by a dictator, but that's what Donald Trump thinks he is. He wishes that he could completely sidestep the other branches of government. And I think if we're going to survive on an international stage, and certainly if we're going to be able to rebuild after this crisis, he cannot be the one in the White House. I think that we saw some footage today where it showed specifically how the Obama administration worked to put together a plan if there were some sort of global pandemic. And Donald Trump defunded it. I mean, just totally disregarded. This is one of those things he can't spin out of. He cannot say, oh, well, like he was trying to say at first, oh, COVID-19 is a Democratic hoax. No, it's not now. It's brought the whole world to its knees. So how is he going to defend that? And again, I think if we're going to rebuild, not only do we need to get Donald Trump out of the White House, but we also need to make sure that Congressman Cohen and his colleagues maintain the majority in the House. And even better, if we could snatch the majority in the Senate. I would love to see Mitch McConnell go home. I don't think he will, but I'd love to see Lindsey Graham go home for sure. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I know he has a young guy running against him who's pretty excited. But, we'll just see what happens. I just encourage everyone to vote. Elections matter. I won my first election by 100 votes. If 100 people did not vote for me, I would not have won that race. So I think it's something that we have to consider. A lot of times we feel like it doesn't make a difference, but it does. If you want to raise your voice and kind of settle your frustration of what's been done these last 3 to 4 years, you're going to have to get in there and vote.
Senator, what you said was interesting about how he told the African-American people, it can't hurt. What can you lose? He said the same thing about that drug. I think it's called Hydroxy Fluoride, and it didn't help people with COVID-19, but it killed some of them. Yeah. So he's certainly not a doctor, and he's also abolished or gotten rid of a lot of the rules and regulations concerning the environment. So our drinking water is worse, our air is worse, and that affects African Americans worse than other people because we're living so many people closer to some of those sites that have been poisoned industrial sites. And so he doesn't care about that because they don't have, Mar-a-Lago doesn't worry about brownfields.
Oh.
President Trump made a comment probably 2 weeks ago that he has total control. Can you explain to those persons watching how control is actually put in their hands when it comes to the election and why it is so important and vital to vote? Just like they showed up and voted for President Barack Obama, why they have the total control to really shift the political atmosphere come election day.
We've got to hope that people do go out and vote, and the democracy, as it's intended, allows the person with the most electoral votes, and we do have an electoral college system, to be the president. Every vote does count, and like Senator Akbari said, she won by 100 votes. I got my state Senate nomination, which was a committee back in 1982, by 1 vote on the 4th ballot. So things can come close, and the lottery, which has produced over $6 billion for education, will continue to. It passed in the Senate by the bare minimum number of votes after about 16 years of trying. So one vote can make a difference. Everybody does need to get out and vote, and I don't think Trump will accept the results. If he loses, I think he'll try to pull something to have some secretaries of state not approve the results if it went against him, try to get it into the Electoral College, and then get it out of the Electoral College because there's not enough votes to give a majority, get it into the House. And if it gets into the House, it's not each congressperson votes for the president, but each state votes according to how their state delegations vote, which means California has 1 vote, Tennessee has 1 vote, New York has 1 vote. And the way it is right now, there are 26 states with Republican majorities in Congress. So he would win that way. I think he will do whatever he can to remain in power because A, he doesn't like to lose. B, he loves the power. C, he and his family are grifting and getting loans and help for their businesses that otherwise would have crumbled. 666, and that's the address, 666. I think it's Madison Avenue, or I think it's Madison Avenue, but it's a big building that Kushner has. It was about under, and he got money from somewhere in the Middle East. It would have had to be foreclosed on. And we don't know how many other loans he's got from the Bank of China. We know he's got a lot of obligations there, and the Deutsche Bank. He will be financially in trouble if he's not president, and he could go to jail if he's not president, because he can be prosecuted by honest administration that follows him and by any state, including New York, where there's an aggressive and an outstanding attorney general who will take him to task for his mistakes.
Wow. If you're not fired up and ready to vote after all of what you've heard, I don't know. So, we want people to not only register, but to get out there and cast those votes, but we want to do it in a safe way. And so it's good to know there are people who are representing us in our best interest in making sure we can vote, maintaining our right to vote as well, to do so safely. So thank you all for just allowing us time to be a part of this conversation. And we are going to sign off in just a moment. But before we do, I want to pray for you both. And I want to just quickly remind our viewers that Sundays at 10:30 a.m. and Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m. join the Boulevard for online worship, a Facebook Live on YouTube, as well as at our website. And we're so excited. We'd love to have you to join us during this particular time.
We also have something for couples coming up this Friday at 7:30 p.m. If you check your e-news or you email info@theboulevard.org, we have a DJ and a comedian and some games planned for all couples of the Boulevard. So we want you to sign up for that so we can have a fun evening for couples where we are physically distancing ourselves from other people, but still remaining connected with our other church members and with your spouse.
So let me just take a moment and pray for those who represent us in government as well as other people on today. Eternal and gracious God, we are grateful for this opportunity to engage in conversation, to be enlightened and informed, and even be inspired for the work that is ahead for us as a nation, as a state, and as a community. Thank you for those who represent us in Nashville and in Washington, D.C. I pray for Congressman Cohen, as I pray for State Senator Akbari, and I pray you'd continue to prosper them, that they might be in health, even as their souls prosper. I pray, God, that you would give them the strength and the perseverance to continue to fight the good fight. And I pray today for the millions of people who are unemployed. I pray for the economically disadvantaged. I pray for first responders and final responders, as I pray for physicians, nurses, and even researchers who are working towards a treatment and a vaccine for COVID-19. Bless them, oh God. And God, continue to bring healing to our land and a resolution to this crisis. And we ask all of these things In the name of the one who gives us the audacity to hope. Amen. Well, God
Amen.
bless you. God keep you all. Thank y'all for joining the turntable. Thank you, Congressman Cohen. Thank you, State Senator Akbari.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. It's good to be part of virtual.
Take care and stay safe.
Stay safe.
Bye, guys.